Well, hello everyone. I hope you're all having a blessed Good Friday. As with the past couple years, we want to take a few moments and offer some devotional reflections for you to consider today as we join with believers around the world, as we commemorate and remember Jesus' sacrifice on the cross and what it means for us. And today, I want our specific reflection to be on considering Jesus' identity as a migrant and the cross as an act of migration. Now, if you know me at all, you know that human migration is something that matters immensely to me. And it's something that matters to me because it matters to God. And I want to show you how the theme of migration is woven into Jesus' life and ministry and ultimately into his sacrificial act on the cross and what we think about every year on Easter. And so to do that, we have to begin with Jesus' beginnings, right? His coming to earth. The very act of incarnation is a migratory act. It is where God crosses the border from heaven to earth and chooses to come and live for a long time here on earth. And that alone is enough for us to see this theme of migration. And Jesus not only is being a God of migrant people, like the people of Israel, such as Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, not only the people of the exile, right? But also himself being a migrant, as he has crossed the border from heaven to earth. But let's also look at his life. So when Jesus is born, he lives in the kingdom of Judea that's run by King Herod. And it is a large kingdom. And so in utero, in his mother's womb, he migrates with his parents from Nazareth in Galilee down to Bethlehem in Judea. And after being born, he is visited by migrant kings, the Magi, who came from somewhere in the east, perhaps beyond the boundaries of the Roman Empire, and they come to worship him. This doesn't sit well with Herod the Great, and so Joseph, Mary, and Jesus have to flee. They are forced into displacement, and they go and seek refuge in the land of Egypt, living as displaced people and refugees. Now, after Herod the Great dies, his kingdom is split between his children. Herod Archelaus rules Judea, where Jerusalem, Samaria, Jericho are. But then his son Philip receives the tetrarchy of Philip, which is on the eastern side of the Sea of Galilee, where perhaps you're familiar with the city of Caesarea Philippi. And then his son Herod Antipas receives the tetrarchy of Galilee. So Jesus and his parents, when they leave their time of displacement in Egypt, migrate back through the kingdom of Herod Archelaus in Judea before resettling again in the kingdom or the tetrarchy of Herod Antipas in Galilee. And so in Jesus' early years, there's a lot of migration. Both within different kingdoms and crossing borders between kingdoms until they find a place of relative safety and life in Nazareth. But that's also not the end of the story, because Jesus' ministry is that of an itinerant, migratory rabbi. Jesus doesn't stay in one place. He begins his ministry in Nazareth, in Galilee, right, in the tetrarchy of Herod Antipas, but his journeys take us throughout the tetrarchy of Philip to Caesarea Philippi, down into the Roman province of Syria, because Herod Archelaus, who received that portion of the kingdom, loses that to Rome. And he journeys throughout the region, crossing the borders between these kingdoms in teaching the ministry and the message that God has given him. And so his life is full of migration. He has a migratory lifestyle. And that is where we see his life. And it is in that he is able to come to Jerusalem and to bring about sufficient anger amongst the leaders of Israel that they turn him over to be condemned. And now we can sit there and say, well, he was innocent, but in the eyes of Rome, he was guilty. In the eyes of Rome, it didn't matter whether or not due process had taken place. In the eyes of Rome, they decided he was guilty, and therefore he was guilty. And so, in the eyes of Rome, he was executed as a criminal. And so you're like, okay, Chris, I understand all this about his life, but what does that have to do with Good Friday? Well, because on Good Friday, Jesus does another migratory act. Jesus migrates from life to death. He crosses the border between earth and Sheol, the underworld, the realm of the dead. In Jewish understanding, all of the dead went to Sheol, to Hades, which is not quite the same as Christian views of hell, right? But it was the place where all of the dead rested, waiting for the day of the Lord. It's in Sheol, in Hades, where we have the bosom of Abraham, where the righteous would go and wait for the day of the Lord to come upon them. And Jesus migrates from life to death and enters and invades Sheol. He goes and he preaches and proclaims the goodness of God to those who are waiting. We read about this in 1 Peter 3, where it says that he goes and proclaims and preaches liberation to the saints who are in Hades. Ephesians, I believe, 4 also talks about how he had to descend into the depths of the earth before he could ascend back to heaven. So even in the cross is a moment of death, but in that, Jesus' spirit migrates into the afterlife, into the realm of the dead. But he doesn't stay dead. Once again, Jesus will migrate back into life, and this time he will bring people with him. In Christian theology, this is called the harrowing of hell, where the Old Testament saints are brought from their place of rest, and at the coming of the day of the Lord, which comes through Jesus' life, death, and resurrection, they are brought into eternity. It also tells us in Matthew 27 that when Jesus cries out his last and the curtain and the veil is torn, that the graves open up. It tells us also that when Jesus resurrects, the dead leave their tombs and enter Jerusalem. So after Jesus has migrated from life to death and into the depths of Hades, he brings others back with him as he does his return journey from death into life. When we look at Jesus' post-resurrection appearances, we see them around Emmaus, which is in Judea and under the Roman province of Syria. We see him migrating again to Galilee, where we have the seaside breakfast with his disciples. So even in his post-resurrection appearances, he is migrating between kingdoms. But then ultimately, he migrates back to heaven. He goes from earth and migrates back to heaven. But even then that's not the end of the journey. Because in going to heaven, we know with confidence that Christ will make another migration, that he will come back to earth. And when he migrates back to earth again, he will come with an invasion force. And so as we consider Jesus' migratory journey from heaven to earth and life to death and Hades, from death and Hades back to earth and life, and from earth back to heaven, remember that his migration journey is not yet complete. For he will return, the migrant God King, to establish home for his people for all time in the new heavens and the new earth. And I understand that immigration and migration is a complicated topic that has a lot of people with a lot of opinions in the world today. And I'm not here trying to tell you how to resolve those. And I recognize that even in hearing some of this, some of you might not like how I have characterized Jesus' ministry. And I would be glad to have more conversation with you about that. I'd be glad to sit down and just pour out God's heart revealed in Scripture. All my contact information is on the church website. But on this Good Friday, as we contemplate Jesus' migratory act from life to death and his subsequent journey back from death to life, bringing others with him, I invite you to consider this. I just ask you to ponder this. remember who it is we serve. I hope you'll have a blessed Good Friday. Tomorrow, Pastor Ryan will share some devotional thoughts about Holy Saturday and Sabbath. But be blessed and go with God.